welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for the last seminar at the Business Forum for today. Before I introduce you to the panel, I'd just like to cover and take you actually through the roller coaster ride that is the world of entrepreneurship. I'd just like to cover a few items, housekeeping. Essentially, this session is going to run for, as I say, 60 minutes. The first section will be about exploring the world of entrepreneurism and what entrepreneurship means to everybody here. Secondly, we'll move into more of the guts of the session, which is about the experiences that these entrepreneurs and these people who have worked with entrepreneurs have experienced in their own working environment and what they've learned and what they can share with you in terms of lessons. At the end, there will be a Q&A session. We'll aim for about 20 minutes or so. Please have your pens ready to write down questions as you go along. So what qualifies me to be sitting here and chairing this panel on entrepreneurship and the mistakes that have been made and indeed are the learning ground for all entrepreneurs and what they have learned from them. So my name is Lui de Rouen, and 15 years ago, on a kitchen table in my flat, I started a communications business that specializes in brand communications for the world of drinks. Why? Because drinks and spirits I find incredibly exciting. There's so much going on. There's so much creativity. There's so much ingenuity. And there's so much agility that has the hallmarks, really, of great entrepreneurship. Since 2005, my business has won 14 awards. We've looked after and helped build over 50 brands. Some of them are the world's leading brands, from Grey Goose through to small startups. Tom of Finland, a brand new brand that's launched only a couple of years ago. But we work with the big guys, the Beam Suntories and the Bacardi Globals, but also, as I say, the small brands, two of which are represented here by Barth and George sitting in the middle. I can tell you also I've worked with the colorful characters and the mavericks that are represented in the entrepreneurial side of the drinks game. They include Alex Wolpert, who started in 5 years ago, the East London Liquor Company. His business today is valued at 15 million. We helped him raise 1.5 million in funding last year. Also worked with the ex-Saatchi & Saatchi director, Jeff Ross. We worked with him for 7 years. Some of you may know of him. He took a garage space in Wellington, New Zealand. He put a pot still in the garage. He created 42 Below vodka. 7 years later, he sold it to Bacardi for 32 million. No bad feat. So I'm going to talk you through the panelists. We have on my left Ben Thomson. Ben leads the marketing for Seedlip. He represents one of the leaders and the experts that supports the entrepreneur that is Ben Branson. Seedlip was launched by Ben Branson, not Ben Thomson, in 2016 to satisfy the need for people who want to have a good drink but are not drinking. When Ben and Ben got together, they were a team of 3. Today, they're a team of over 70 in 3 countries around the world, and that includes offices in Los Angeles and Sydney. The product is available in 28 cities and in some of the best bars, restaurants, and hotels around the world. Ben here was voted one of the top marketers in the Drum Awards recently. His mission and responsibility for the brand is to make sure that Seedlip leads the non-alcoholic drinks category globally. Not an easy task with the amount of competition that's on his back door. Next up is entrepreneur George Frost. George is a 32-year-old founder of the #1 selling premium rum brand in the UK, the Duppy Share. George launched the brand in 2015 and worked at quintessentially lifestyle business. It was back then in the haze of the Notting Hill Carnival in 2013, something dawned on him. Why does, one of the biggest celebrations of Afro-Caribbean culture in the world, why is there no premium rum brand to be seen? And so his journey began into the world of drinks. In 2018, George won an award, Guardian of Rum, and today the Duppy Share is selling 150,000 bottles per year. His business is valued at 12 million. To his right is Brosseau. Barth is 29. He comes from Bordeaux. Barth is studying entrepreneurship at the Cambridge University of Business School. His passion is for places and storytelling. And he has recently, there's been a shift of him. He's been working in the realm of real estate, and he's moved into the world of spirits. He created a company called Greenwood Distillers last year. It's a small business with a big ambition. to build bridges that link countries, continents, and cultures through the world of spirits, working with master distillers from Japan to Mexico, Kentucky, and the Highlands. Last but not least is Dawn Davies at the end. Dawn leads the portfolio build for specialty drinks she's responsible for buying. Dawn started her career working in a pub in Edinburgh, then graduating to head sommelier in some of the leading restaurants in London, including Zuma and the Ledbury. Her rise in drinks didn't stop there. In 2007, she became head buyer at Selfridges, and she helped build that store into a highly reputable and leading store for spirits and drinks. And today, also, she is one of the only 134 women in the world who is a master of wine. Today, Dawn's job is to keep an eye out for the big trends and handpicking exciting new brands, as well as the established brands that have potential that is yet to be unlocked. So I just wanted to open the floor to the panel right now and start maybe with George and ask the question, entrepreneurship, George, what would you say the defining characteristics of an entrepreneur?
Very good question, Louis. And thanks for having me. And Dawn was also the first buyer ever to say yes to the Duppy share and also to say yes to Seedlip, both at Selfridges. So we're very thankful to her. I think I've done my research today, Louis, and I looked up the dictionary definition of entrepreneur, and it is someone who starts a business, risks their own sort of financial capital with the hope of turning a profit. And I think that is the key part, I think, that a lot of people overlook in terms of being an entrepreneur. It's kind of seen as something that, or some people see it as something that people do with the hope of it turning into something. But I think that the number one thing that needs to happen in order for an entrepreneur to be successful is for it not to be to hope that it's successful, but to be willing to sweat, to bleed, to do everything to make it turn a profit. So for me, I think that the number one characteristic that will in some way link all entrepreneurs together is a real underlying desire and willingness to really work hard.
Interesting. Actually, there is a series of talks that Charles Rolls, founder of Fevertree, gives around the world, and he summarizes, I think, what you're saying as blind belief. In other words, it doesn't come from the rational brain. It's something that you feel more than something that you can actually, write the maths for. So yeah. Thanks for that. Bart, can I ask you, what would you say are some of the defining characteristics of a successful entrepreneur?
I think George is, as usual, completely right. I think it's another definition is risk-taking under conditions of uncertainty. I think that a good entrepreneur is involved in actions where the downside is limited, but the upside is exponential. So I think one of the, lesson or a good advice is to look for activities where you can limit your downside, but have an upside that is potentially way higher than what you risk.
Excellent. Dawn, can you give us your take on this?
I think for me, an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, I think that's the key word in this, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that aren't successful, is someone that listens, that understands, and really does the research first. For me, a lot of brands come to me and they definitely haven't done the research first. They haven't looked at competitors. They haven't looked at pricing structures in the model, in the marketplace. And I think that's a huge thing. If you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be someone that is willing to do the research before you launch the brand. Don't do the research as you're launching the brand. Do it before. And don't listen to your friends. Go to neutral people to listen, because friends will just tell you what they think you want to hear. And I think that's really key for me, is that understanding, that listening and doing the research.
Excellent. Thank you, Dawn. And Ben, you work with a former pea farmer, or from a family, 300 years of pea farming. What makes the company you work for, and Ben Branson, the founder of Seedlip, what defines him as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I think I've been very lucky to sort of work for an entrepreneur that has such a very clear vision and mission. So vision really changed the way the world drinks and solve the dilemma of what to drink when you're not drinking. And actually having those kind of clear parameters to play within, and allowing his team that we've kind of carefully built to play within those tight, kind of clear parameters. I think at the start, you sort of so easily, a lot of things happen quite reactively, and have done over the last sort of 3.5 years, and actually having something to fall back on like our vision has been really, really helpful. And that's testament to Ben, really.
Yeah, excellent. So it's about blind belief. It's about availability to risk. It's about understanding actually what profit is. Clearly, you have to do your research before you endeavor on this journey. And actually, that research never stops because the world is changing at such speed. And certainly, having a clear vision and mission that is communicated throughout your organization, be it 3 people or 300 people, it is imperative that you get that right. Those are the building blocks of a successful business that can grow without you having to do U-turns and make mistakes along the way, or too many at least. Okay, what I wanted to do at this point is now I'll start with Dawn and Ben for you to answer the question. As we know, entrepreneurs you can come up with an idea and you can have all the blind belief and the energy that you have, but actually turning that into a reality and a business plan that is deliverable, which includes everything from production to sales, and then loyalty, so resales. From your point of view, what are the characteristics that qualify an expert or a leader that forms part of the wider team supporting delivery of that plan?
You have to be able to go out, talk to people, really engage people, bring them to you. But the most key thing, again, is this idea of listening. Listening is something we don't ever do, or we don't do well. And it's super important when you listen to your staff, you learn from their ideas, you listen to what they're saying you're doing wrong. It's a really, really important part of leadership. You have to be. I would never, with my team, I have a team of about 20 people, a bit more now, and I really value each and every one of those opinions. And I think that's so, so important. Learn from your team, and actually delegation. I'm a terrible delegator, but I think that's super important, especially when you're an entrepreneur, because you can't do everything yourself. Yes, in the beginning you will, because it's just going to be you, but there has to be a point where you learn to delegate. And I think the greatest leaders are those that actually employ people who are more intelligent and better than them, because I want someone to be able to do my job. I want to sit back and retire. Hey.
Nice. Ben?
So I guess at Seedlip we have this culture of coaching. So we obviously have line managers and whoever we report to, but actually having a coaching culture that allows and I guess enforces people to think for themselves as opposed to telling what to do. So a lot of I guess my team, there's I guess stages where you have to say do this, but actually a large proportion of what we do is asking the right questions for them to think themselves. I think a good leader is someone that is able to do that and not be a sort of, I guess, autocratic in that respect, particularly with the business growing so quickly. It's about employing people who have the confidence and belief in themselves to fail, to make mistakes, but to learn from them really quickly. And that coaching culture helps, I think.
Excellent. Yeah, I concur. My agency also, we've fostered a very strong coaching culture. I realized that I reached a point where my business was not growing, and it was very clear to me after a series of mistakes that your business is only, you represent the ceiling, and sometimes entrepreneurs, without being open to new skills and developing their own competence, can actually represent a block to the future growth of that business. So I'd love to know, Barth, let's start with you. What defines the leaders and the experts that you have, either in your inner circle, in your organization, but also those who you hire externally as well to help you achieve your business plan?
I think complementary skills, 100%. I've realized quite quickly that I was, I think, a very poor manager. I hate micromanagement. I hate to tell people what to do. So I try to surround myself with people that know what to do and that they tell me what to do. So it's a bit of a, reversing the normal pattern. I think we have Kieran that is laughing there, my commercial director. He knows all about this stuff. So he tells me what to do, basically, most of the time. So I think it's about putting your ego sort of aside. And it's, there is quite a famous dilemma called the rich versus king dilemma question. And if you're all about the control, you are blocking the growth of the company, exactly what you just said right now. So I think it's about bringing people in that can bring another perspective or attitude to how you do things. My company is very recent. All these guys are luminaries in what they do. They are extremely extraordinary. I'm much more recent, so I'm still learning as I go as well.
Thank you. And George?
Yeah, I think most of it's been covered. I think what Dawn said about hiring better than you, which for me is very, very easy, is very important. I think on top of which the guys have covered, but I think just to have a North Star, which I think Seedlip's North Star is a very obvious one, you know, what to drink when you're not drinking. And I think if everyone is tied into that, believes in that, and knows that that is the final outcome, then delegation or no delegation, if the team is left to their own devices, you're going to be going in the right way. I think if you don't have that North Star, you don't know your kind of why you're doing what you're doing and where you want to get to, then how the hell is anyone ever going to get there with the greatest delegation, greatest leadership that there is? So I think, yeah, part of everything the guys have said, and also just having that real laser focus, long-term laser focus on where you want to get to.
And if I could just ask you, the four of you, are there any tricks or tools or proven ways of working that have allowed you to become better leaders? For example, I gave an example of business coaching, which I did for 3 years. Is there mentors might be another way to develop skills? Is there any live examples that you've had or you've seen in your organization which can help people to develop personally?
Okay, looking at me. I really believe that, you know, and I've done this throughout my life, whether it was in restaurants or, you know, in Selfridges or what have you, I need my team to believe 100% in me. I need to lead from the front. You know, it's about going out there. It's about making those connections. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You know, and I think it's showing people that, you know, you give them as much love and then they'll give you love back. Yeah, I think that's super important. And it's something that I'm a hugger. I hug everyone. You know, from my staff to my bosses, I'm a hugger. But I think it's then you take people with you because they want to work for you. You know, to be a good boss, you have to really care for your staff and your people because they're the ones that are going to make you great. You know, you don't make yourself great. The people you surround yourself with make you great.
For me, in terms of mentors, I think that you can find mentors in your best mates. It's anyone. I think mentor is a term where it can be like everyone should only have one mentor and you should report into them monthly. And I think that isn't the way to go. I think a mentor is anyone that you respect, that you can learn from the way that they do certain things. I mean, I think for me and for us, my ex-boss Ben Elliott, who's now our chairman at Duppy, I look up to him in so many different ways, mainly because of the things that he does that I know I can hope to do a little bit better than I'm doing now. And for us at the moment, where I think sales should always be the bottom line of any business, and marketing, sorry Ben, is very important, of course. But if those aren't driving sales, then it's pointless. And Ben certainly instilled in us that kind of, you know, the rest is good, but if the sales aren't there, then there's nothing here.
So I sort of touched on it already, but Seedlip have invested on taking quite a few people on actual external coaching courses, so that they feel comfortable that they can, I guess, speak to their relevant colleagues. So that again, you know, I guess it's how you speak, it's the language that you speak. So asking open-ended questions, how could you do it? Actually kind of putting the power back on them and having that kind of adult-to-adult relationship rather than having quite quickly that to parent-child, line manager, colleague relationship, which I don't think is particularly healthy. I think having, you know, we're all adults, right? And it doesn't matter if you've been in a company for 6 months or 3 years. Having that even playing field, and yeah.
I think just one thing Bart said earlier, which I think is a incredible point, and one that I really hope we're creating a company where it's true and apparent, is that making mistakes isn't something that you want to hide from the team, because the second you do that, it's just kicking the can down the road. And it's obviously you don't want to create a culture where people are proud to make mistakes. But I think the culture you want to create is where people are proud to learn from the mistakes, and you can only do them. Yeah, and you can only do that if there's a culture there, which, you know, we only need to look at any business news, and the cultures which go downhill are those less than positive cultures where people hide mistakes. Whereas if you create a culture where those mistakes can be talked about, I think that's where you can create a really positive, fast-moving, growing business.
Excellent. And Bart, can we turn to you? Do you have a mentor, or do you
I
have...
have several mentors, actually.
Sorry?
Several.
Yes.
From all walks of life. I mean, I wouldn't call them mentor. You know, it's not like an institutional thing. It's something that has just happened throughout the years, where you ask for advice. I mean, I was going to actually link what George just said with what Don said previously. It's very, like, it can be a very lonely sort of route when you're building a business sometimes. And from the outside, it looks great. Doing these products and selling this stuff, and they don't see all the rubbish that happens behind the doors. But it's very interesting how, by being quite humble and asking for advice around you, you'll see that it's very hard to to sell something. However, to ask advice is a way to bring people into what you're doing and get a lot of great insights. And that's how you build a relationship through this sort of approaching them without ego and just trying to learn from other people. And it's so often you feel quite lonely sometimes, and at the same time, as an entrepreneur, you start from who you know, what you have, and who you are. And often, you're only one person away to the person that can unlock an issue, or that can help you with something. So by starting knowing that you don't know a lot, and and you're quite ignorant about the whole thing, people will surprisingly, or the karma or whatever, will arrange themselves to help you out afterwards. So it's very interesting how the things pan out in the end.
And I think we're super lucky. We're in an industry where we're family, and there's always, it's like 6 degrees of separation. I think someone will always help you, because actually we don't want anyone not to succeed. It's then listening to that advice, which is probably the bit that some people don't get right. But I 100% agree with you. I think that's really important.
And I think the one bit of advice, and I know Jack, my business partner, who's in the crowd today, it frustrates us when people come to us knowing that we've set up a spirits brand, asking for help, but they don't want to tell us. People can be so protective over their ideas, and my advice is be the complete opposite. Tell as many people as you can your idea, because then you'll get the feedback about it. And that fear that you'll have that someone else will run away with your idea and make money which should have been yours will never come to fruition, because that person will never have the drive and energy that you would have brought to it. So I think it is that idea of taking advice on board, but you can't take advice unless you're willing to explain to people the path you want to go on.
It's very interesting. We've covered, it's clearly a very broad subject matter, entrepreneurship, and what I think a theme that keeps coming through is being human and being vulnerable. There is a place for it, because that's how you're going to learn, and you're going to be able to collaborate with people. It's incredibly important, which segues nicely into the next section, which is where our panelists are going to share a mistake that they learned from in business, but also, most importantly, the tips that they have for you guys, hopefully, to avoid you making the mistakes, losing money, U-turns. Hopefully, yes, it will mitigate some of those things. So we're going to start with, Ben. Ben's going to tell us about gift packs and an expensive journey that they went on, and what he learned from it.
So I think first to say is we make a lot of mistakes, and actually, every business meeting we ask everyone to provide a highlight and a low light and a learning as a result. So this just is an example of a sort of much wider, I guess, issue. But yeah, essentially the Seedlip mistake has been around NPD generally, and some things we do brilliantly, and actually it feels kind of nice project to work on, and there's other projects that just for some reason just take a lot of effort, and it's incredibly draining, and there's a lot of contradiction, and there's just all sorts of things that go wrong. So yeah, this point was a gift pack that we created for grocery, and it, because of inefficiencies, because of the fact poor communication internally between marketing, sales, finance, ops, we didn't make any money out of it whatsoever. I mean, revenue fine, but actually it made no profit for us whatsoever.
So in fact, you lost money because you spent a lot of time producing it. So that's no.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, you laugh, you laugh a bit because
I mean, a business mistake being making 250k, I'd take that.
But it's just one of those ones where we've made a mistake a couple of times, and it boils down to just working cross-functionally. Sales team grew faster than the marketing team. The marketing team grew faster than the ops team. And we had literally one person in ops for the first 2.5 years, which, you know, is obviously one of the key drivers of a successful business. And yeah, that was one of the mistakes.
So you've got 3 things you learned, and one was clearly that the interfacing between different departments, sales, planning, production, operations, and so on, needs to be much tighter. There is a case, I think, also you shared with us in terms of clarifying the goal. Tell us a little more about what you learned and how you would do this differently next time around.
Yeah, so...
Sorry, this is as you relate to the goal, but also the lead. So it's about allocating the right team and the resource to deliver the project.
Yeah, so we use this, we use Slack. I don't know if anyone uses Slack. Really, really useful tool. You can set up projects and sort of pinpoint who exactly you want to work with. But ultimately, you need that face-to-face meeting. And actually also have that project lead. So actually someone that goes, I'm leading the gifting project. I may not necessarily be in finance or ops, but ultimately I'm here as the project lead to continue this. And a lot of these projects didn't have that person. It was a kind of an assumption of who was working on what. So we've actually kind of hired now a person whose sole responsibility is NPD and sits in ops, but equally is that kind of umbrella between marketing and all the other cross-functional departments. So that's one key thing that was proved really, really useful.
Okay, and then I think you've covered it already, but essentially, it's essentially what's the objective? The objective was to satisfy and to get into the off-trade at a critical time of year to generate sales but profit, and it didn't work out.
So I guess we use this phrase properly but at pace, and a startup that is category leading, it's wanting to act quickly. There is danger of that slipping into just acting quickly and not doing it properly, which this is a great example of. So, and the other thing I guess is sales will want to sort of, I guess, get new products on the market as quickly as possible, and you'll show, for example, a mock-up of a product that might not necessarily be possible yet to the buyer or whoever, and then it's kind of frantically going, Christ, we've got to do this now. We've actually got to make this actually a commercially viable product, and that's.
I can see some smiles from my team in the audience. This topic chimes with us too, because as a marketing communications agency, when you're sitting with a client which is directing you from marketing, and then you've got an operations team, and they're not gelling or working as closely as they might, everybody's under a huge amount of pressure, sometimes unrealistic, but it is the space that we are operating in. Ben, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
George.
Basically, a problem of mine, certainly, and I think anyone starting a business where it's, at that time, it was just myself, you can quite quickly not follow your gut. You can quite quickly try to put in levels of structures and essentially kicking the can down the road. You know the right decision, but you don't want to make it because you know it will either offend people, cause short-term pain, and that reason you don't act, you don't make the decision to say no. And in this example, it was our first ever design agency. They showed us the first designs of our product, and if you'd asked me, I knew at that moment they weren't the right design agency for me. But rather than saying that to them at that point, I kicked the can down the road, and I thought somehow magically they're going to pull a rabbit out of the hat, which they then didn't. And we then had to go back to square one, the square that we would have been at way cheaper if I'd actually made a decision at the beginning. So I think that particularly when you're, as I said, when you're on your own, you can often not trust your gut. And I think that is not only denying yourself the chance to learn from your mistake, but it's making the mistake a lot worse.
And can I ask, because there is a lot written about intuition and trusting your gut in entrepreneurship. Of course, you're in a very busy, crazy world with lots of decisions to make on the go all the time. George, have you come up with a tactic, let's say, or a strategy that allows you to, access a calm space so that you can make more informed decisions from the gut?
I think, the quick answer is no. Otherwise, it would be a far, far easier game. I think, you can obviously go the other way, and I think that would then negate what Dawn said, which is always listen to people close to you. You can go the other way and just always think you're right, always trust your gut, which is certainly not the right way of going about it. I suppose that the ultimate sort of environment would be one where you can take other people's counsel on board, you can really think it over, and then make a decision that you feel is right. I suppose that this is more of what not to do rather than a what to do. What not to do is to know in your gut that something is wrong and not do something about it.
So not act on it.
Yeah.
Okay, and that actually is your first step. Can you just? Well, I guess we've explored it. Difficult and challenging conversations come regularly, and you have to have them.
Yeah, and again, this quote, I don't even know who Ryan Holiday is, but I like the quote, which is, don't say maybe if you want to say no. I think so often, whether it's a mate asking you for dinner next week or whatever it is, you don't want to go. You want to say no, and you say maybe because it means that you don't have to say no yet. And I think that shows itself in so many ways in business, and you end up agreeing to do things which in your heart that it's not right for the business. So we get asked, and I'm sure Barth's the same, and I know Ben's the same, we get asked to do endless, essentially giving our product away for free at events. And rather than putting forward a very good a good argument as to why we can't do that, we might say, we'll get back to you. And then sure enough, 3 days before the event, you can't let them down. So you end up going down to that one Young's pub in Brixton and standing there for the whole night, cursing every second that you decided not to say no. So I think, again, trust your gut. If you want to say no on the eve of the event, say no the second you get the invitation.
Okay, and the slide I've just switched to behind you says be brave. That's part of this same insight, is it not?
Yeah, this is, for me, is more about being brave in remaining positive. I think at one part in our business, rather than the answer being yes, unless it was proved no, we turned into a business where it was no unless it was proved yes. And I think that the second you lose faith in your own positivity and in your own gut, and you start to heed the line of being negative and being pessimistic, which is by far and away the easiest thing to do, is to say no, I think that's when the business really suffers, where creativity is sapped away and where people don't want to take the decisions which are a little bit of a gamble. And I think it's that area of the business when you're making decisions which are a bit of a gamble, that you're asking your team to perform at beyond 110%. That's where the real growth comes from. And so I think it's not necessarily be brave in that capacity, but it's be brave and to trust positivity rather than err on the side of caution and trust negativity, I suppose.
Excellent. Thank you, George. Our next mistake, Bart, would you like us to take us on your journey, please, with the experience that was your hard learning curve?
Yeah, no, so basically, to create a new product is complicated, it's hard, takes ages, you have multiple stakeholders involved, and you basically don't do what I did, which was to just work with the designer, have my idea in my head of what I wanted, work on the idea in an abstract manner, completely disconnected from the feasibility and convenience of the actual product, and then arrive and realize, well, actually, you can't do what you wanted to do. You have to start back from the drawing board. So I would say bring reality in the creative process as soon as possible. So open the conversations with your manufacturers, with your dry goods suppliers, your label guys, the glass guys, the packaging guys. I mean, literally as soon as possible, bring them in, because otherwise you're going to lose a lot of time. It's going to be stressful. And if you do what I did, which is not to wait for the licenses, so that you don't have your licenses, you're not ready yet to all the liquor or all the rest, it's an even more bigger nightmare. So please be sure to apply for your licenses if you're in the spirits world as early as possible, because it will take ages. I mean, we are super lucky with HMRC. They were, HMRC, with the UK authorities. They were incredibly helpful, but do this in advance. If it's 45 days, take 60 days. Build contingencies in all your processes. So allow for room of maneuver, allow for time, allow for all the unknown that will happen in the way, basically. So that's for me, the licensing element is very important. Dry goods element is also very important. I mean, I don't know if you, oh yeah, there you go. So basically, I thought it was a great idea to have a bottle with facets, because my story is all about the Picts, which is kind of lost tribe in the Northern Highlands who were incredible stone carvers. So they left stone carvings behind, etc. So I wanted my packaging to reflect my brand, my liquid to reflect the packaging, and to approach everything in a holistic manner. But that cost me a fortune. So mold creation, to get a bespoke glass is just so expensive, I hadn't realized. Labels. So we had this idea of doing these round labels with a hole in the middle, which means that when you go to the bottling lines, they tell you, well, we can't process this in an automatic manner because there is a hole in the middle. So you have to do semi-automatic or manual labeling. It's more expensive. The nice kind of blue fringe you see around the fonts, Pictish fringe, was harder to emboss the font itself to get what I wanted. So basically what you see here is full of mistakes. But in the end, you learn to kind of, you adapt. So what I would suggest is, as early as possible, bring the reality in the conversation with the manufacturers, work out of renders, so get the best renders you can initially, see what's the reaction of the public, or guys you don't know, guys you know, what they think about the design, go back to drawing board, etc. So really bring reality in.
And your next tip, Bart, is about planning. How, if you did this again, well, you certainly will do it again, how much time, additional time, will you allow for the planning phase?
So for me, licensing, if it's 45 days, take 60 days at least. Design-wise, if you plan for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, take 6 months if you can. And then bring the label guys, the glass guys, everybody as early as possible in the process. So the idea is to build contingencies at each sort of step of the way, because all the processes are sort of interconnected.
Yep.
And when you want to go for bottling, for instance, make sure you book your bottling way in advance. So for instance, if it's September, literally ask for it in February or March. Why? Because during the Christmas period, the big guys, the big corporations, will almost kind of monopolize all the bottling lines. And if you don't do this in advance, your bottling will be moved to January or February, and without knowing it, you just lost 5 or 6 months, like this.
So from beginning to end, to carry out this project again, what would the lead time be?
Wow, I don't know anymore. No, I can't answer this. I mean, the good thing is that I'm lucky enough to work with extremely capable people who are also really well networked. So and what I was saying earlier about being humble and putting your ego aside, and that's going to bring my second point, in fact, in the discussion, is that it's way easier to ask favors out of people if you're not a dick, basically. Sorry for the camera, but if you're a nice guy, and people will move out of their way to help you. If you're this kind of arrogant guy who's trying to squeeze down the prices, and negotiating the lowest stuff all the time, people will be like, no, we don't want to work with this guy.
Which is your next tip, in fact, which is about selecting the right suppliers.
Yeah. So basically, the idea of procurement is quite interesting, I think, because it's very telling to the kind of entrepreneurship tale. Procurement happens between the ideation phase, so where you have your creative ideas, or when you have sort of defined your opportunity, and the reality, which is when you're trying to sell your products. But you have to look at these 3 sort of phases almost at the same time. So you can do these 3 processes more or less at the same time. So choosing your suppliers right, so get samples as early as possible. If you are happy with the design of your label, for instance, get samples made as soon as possible. See whether you like the touch, whether you like the feel. Otherwise, go back to it. This idea of procurement is very easy, depending on what your background is. I come from a background where it's like hard figures and stuff like this, that you want to squeeze and get the best price out of everybody you speak with, and in a very almost kind of counterintuitive way. You don't want to behave this way. You want people to be happy to work with you, and you want people to bring interesting stuff to the table and to bring ideas to the table, and they won't do this if you're only about the numbers.
And your third tip is what you're explaining, I think, is understanding that your partners need to be, you need to be treating people, everybody like they're your partners.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah. So in a nutshell, it's the third part. So let's say ideation, procurement, and selling, for instance. So the selling part, in fact, starts way earlier than you think. So if you are lucky enough to know guys who work, I don't know, in the restaurant business or in the bar business or whatever, by bringing them the renders you've produced when you were working with your manufacturers and to ask them their opinion on it, they will feel like they belong to the adventure you're building. So they will feel like they're part of the creative process, which make it way easier to then sell to them afterwards. So the idea that when you approach these three phases in a synergetic manner, you are also, your customers are your partners are your customers. If you treat everybody right and you are humble and you ask advice, it usually becomes good in the end, so far.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Dawn, if we can end with your story, which I think actually brings everything to do with production and all those growing pains, it brings it to a nice conclusion, because yours are strong recommendations on what it's like for the buyer who's actually going to purchase these spirits.
So I think you've got to think of me as the gatekeeper. I'm the person that's going to allow you to reach the market, whether it's bars, it's shops, it's direct selling. You know, and I see over 1,000 products a year in various shapes or forms, whether that's by email or tasting in somewhere like this. And I have to distill that into something I want to choose from my business. And I'm looking at it selling into bars and restaurants. So do I think this product is going to go well in bars? Is it going to work for cocktails? Or the other side, is it going to sell well in retail? So packaging, key. You know, and I kind of look at when you look at how people have developed their products. The first one, and you know, I think, Bart, you asked me today, how do I choose something? And I'm like, liquid. If you don't have a good product, get out. Go back to the drawing board, start again. Because actually, you can have the best packaging in the planet, you can have £1,000,000, if you don't have good liquid, I don't want it. And I think, you know, I one of the brands that I worked with in the very beginning was a company called Mermaid Gin. And he sent me some liquid. And I was like, this isn't good. and I'm brutal. You know, I'm brutal. If you say to me, what didn't you like about it? I will tell you. And, you know, and I don't do that in a mean way. I do that because actually, if you listen to me, you'll get it right. Why? Because I've been doing this 20 years. I know I don't look that old. And, you know, he went back and he worked on the liquid and he nailed it. And I thought, you know, that takes balls to listen and go back and redo it and say, can you look at this again? Same with this packaging. I said, you know, the liquid's now good. Now you need to work on the packaging. I've gone from selling 6 bottles in 6 months to 60 bottles in a month. And, you know, I think that's a real thing. I'm not going to buy a product that's going to sit on my shelves. I need products to churn. I need to move. And so liquid's super important. Packaging's super important. Listen to what the buyers are telling you. Don't harass a buyer. That's probably my biggest point. I get so many people that are like, did you like my product? Did you like my product? Did you like my product? I'm like, man, if I haven't come back to you super quick, I probably don't love your product. And I'll always feedback. I'll always go. And, you know, people come to me all the time saying, can you look at this? Oh, I have a new and innovative gin. No, you don't. There is no such thing as a new and innovative gin. There's just a gin that's got a different botanical. You know, be honest about the product. Don't come to me with marketing spiel. You know, if I say to you, I don't taste with brands, you can email me and say, can we have a meeting? I'm like, no. I want to taste by myself because the product should speak for itself. You know, it's super important also to look at your pricing. I had a guy come to me the other day and he gave me it was a cannabis CBD bitter. I thought the branding was fantastic. I thought the product was fantastic. Then I looked at the pricing and I was like, ooh, £95 RRP? Ambitious. And I said to him, okay, you know, like I could risk it. I could maybe take 12 bottles, see if it sells. You know, sometimes you take a risk, you take a punt. He goes, no, minimum order quantity is 180. I'm like, 180, 95 pounds of a product that is not tested in the market. I don't think so. You know, really, really understand what is if you're going after, who are you going after? Who is your target audience? You know, if you want to go into a multiple, you need to understand the multiple's price structure. I, as a buyer, am always going to ask you for a better deal than you're going to give me. So build that in to your pricing. You know, I might say to you, I want a 10+1. Or you want to sell that at £22? Well, I need the price to be X. Because I always want a little bit more margin than a standard margin. You know, and look at that and work that into your business plan because that's super important to make sure pricing's right. Because you can have great product and terrible pricing. And I think it's this one, another one. You know, this is Macallan. I remember when Macallan did their Ruby, Amber, Nectar series or whatever it was called. And I turned around and said, the customer's really not going to understand this. What does ruby mean? What does amber mean? They couldn't even tell me. Now, isn't it interesting that 5 years after they launched it, this is no longer a thing? Because the consumer didn't understand it. You know, you've got to go out and benchmark or test. Benchmarking is super important. People come to me and say, this packaging's amazing. Well, if you put it next to Hendrix or you put it next to Kraken or, you know, packaging that's super standout on shelf, it's not amazing. You know, benchmarking is very, very important. Don't just sit there and create your liquid and think, oh, I've created my liquid. Awesome. Test it against other liquids. Test it against things at the same price. You know, there's so many things. I mean, I could probably speak for another 20 hours, and I know I can't. But, you know, I think there's so much that you need to really, really, really think about and really kind of, and benchmarking is very, very, very important. You know, there's this sort of marketing. Know who you're marketing to. Don't try and do everyone. It's not going to work. You know, George saw a hole in the market, and he went after that hole. He didn't try and do 9 other different things. So I think it's really, really key to really talk to people, to listen to what they have to say. You know, all of us here, we're happy to give you our advice, you know, if you approach us in the right way. I think that's also really important. Yeah, I'm a busy person. Don't expect me to answer you in 5 seconds. You know, let me have time, I will come back to you, but I may not answer in 5 minutes. So don't send me another email in 10 minutes saying, you didn't answer my question. Oh, I didn't. So I think there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of advice out there, and there's things like this. Taste, benchmark, understand your market, and understand your pricing structure would be my 4 things. And don't piss off the buyer, 5th. That's a disaster.
What is because we're obviously still hassling nicely buyers and trying to turn no's into yeses. What is the number one way of not how not to piss off a buyer, but how to keep a buyer on side?
I think it's about relationships. Relationships are really, really key. You know, when I first met George, he came up to me. We were doing a rum night in Selfridges, and Ian Burrell was there, and George jumps up, and I could see he had so much energy. He's like talking away, blah 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 to Ian, and then he's
Ian
like,
Burrell's global rum ambassador, so basically like David Beckham of rum.
Don't tell it to his face. Yeah. He'll get a bigger head than he always does. And then George is like, I really need to sell into Selfridges. He goes like, who the hell am I going to talk to in Selfridges? And Ian's just pissing himself. He's just like,
I was like, hi.
Yeah, and also do your research on the buyer. My name's Dawn. I'm not a man. So when you email Mr. Davies, that's super going to piss me off because you haven't done your research into who I am and what my branding is or what my products are. You know, don't just send blanket emails to companies because that just doesn't work. You know, you give a personal touch. Let the buyer have time to come back to you. You know, we don't have all the time in the world. I think it's building a relationship. I buy people. You know, I buy into a brand, and I've launched some of the most successful brands in the UK because I really, really believed in the people and the product. And I think that's key. Be yourself.
Excellent. Dawn, thank you very much. So I'd just like to sum up before we go open the floor to questions. What I've recorded is so much information here, and it's all incredibly valuable, but it could probably be housed under the 5 following headers, and that is people. Do not underestimate the people who will help you to realize your dream and your ambition. The planning. Planning is absolutely critical. If you don't have one, everybody's going to be running around like cats. The process, understand that things are complex and there are key steps in processes. Get clarity on what they are before you start the project. Production and product, of course, you've got to get that right. If your liquid's poor, forget spending money on the packaging. And last but not least, of course, we're not doing this for fun. This is about generating profit. And ultimately, as the examples that were given, if you're not clear on what that profit margin is going to be, then you've got to go back to the drawing board. So what I'd like to do now, I think we have 10 minutes or so remaining, and it would be great. There's a mic here to field questions from the floor. Please raise your hand if you want to ask the panel a question.
Hello. It's maybe more of like a personal type question, but when you were launching your brands, how did you decide when to like go full time with them? Like, did you balance like multiple things before you were full time working on them? And then at what point did you feel confident enough to scale to make your first hire? Like that whole process from you working for someone else to hiring your first person just seems like amazing to me.
Who'd like to go first?
Quickly. I'll try and go quickly. I think that two sides of that. I think number one, my advice is if you want to do something, quit everything else and focus on that one thing. I think not only do you tend to owe that to your current employer, who hopefully you still have a good relationship with, but more I see so many people who I go and have a catch-up coffee with them and they're like, yeah, look, I really want to launch X, which is a great idea. And then I bump into them a year later and they're still working in the same company, still planning on launching X. So I think that actually making the jump, obviously there are ramifications of that in terms of income, etc., but making that jump is so, so important. And then in terms of the first hire, I think that's a case of needs must. You'll realize when you can't do it on your own anymore. And I would always say that first part is when you can pull on everyone else and you can ask people for advice and but when your bandwidth, you just know you can't continue doing it if, balls are being dropped, then that's when you get someone else. And actually, I'm not just saying this to suck up to him because he's in the room, but a friend called Ben who launched a mezcal was one of the people it's called Pensador, it's a great mezcal. He was one of the people who came to see me and he was like, I'm launching this mezcal, and I actually haven't told him this, but after that first meeting, I was like, there's another one. There's another one that I've met with them and nothing's going to come of it. And then 6 months later, he'd already done, so much. And I think at that time it was his everything. And, he was traveling to Mexico. He was visiting all of the various, what are they called? Distilleries? Fields. So that's what I'd say.
But Bart, I'm sure you have an opinion on this.
Yeah, of course. For me, it's a bit different because my former employer became my investor. So that's why I always, stay in touch with the people. Don't, just close the door like I've had enough. Just, so if you stay good with these people or with people around you, they may sort of buy into you as well. So that's one. And number two, about the first hire, I think, as George said, it's so important to reach this level where you are like 110%, that you can't take it anymore, because it means that once you've been involved with the procurement process, the glass making process, sourcing dry goods, building the liquid, or work with the guys who build the liquid for you, etc., nobody can bullshit you basically, because you've been there, so you've learned through your scars or through your whatever, and so otherwise you may be disconnected. If you have the money to hire people kind of too early, then you won't be able to supervise correctly or to monitor correctly what's happening because you don't know what's going on really. So I think it's good to learn to do everything by yourself initially, and then when you can't take it, literally can't take it, then you bring other people in.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple more questions.
I've got a question about investors. If I'm about to walk into a room with a room full of potential investors, what would be your one piece of advice? What would be your one piece of advice?
So if Alia is about to walk in the room with pitch her idea to a room full of investors, what is the advice you can give?
You go.
It's hard. For me, I think it's a blend of, and we're fundraising at the moment, and I think it's a blend of clearly being a dreamer, as in having a massive goal you want to achieve, but being realistic about it. I see a lot of, I hear a lot of, when we go in to pitch to people, we hear a lot of their stories about people who come in, almost like the guy trying to sell 98 quid bitters and selling 100 of them, is you've got to have that tinge of realism to it. So I think they say that passion and enthusiasm can win over anything, but I think that it's got to have that. And actually, it's Dawn's point as well, is research the opportunity till you're blue in the face and know that you've got the answer. And there are lots of brand people who tell you the most important thing in a business is the why, as in why you're doing it. But if there's not a gap for your product, then what's the point?
And I think it's knowing your numbers. My boss is probably one of the most amazing entrepreneurs. He's the third biggest whiskey collector in the world. He's a visionary. He's an incredible man. And, I know so many people go in and pitch to him, and he knows numbers. Like, he'll look at it and go, that doesn't work. you're not being realistic. So really know your numbers and make sure you have a really clear understanding of what is this achievable? I think that's
Or
really
if you
important.
don't know your numbers, which I don't, have a business partner who does. And that's what I'm lucky to have.
Okay. 2 more questions.
Hi, Don. So you did say, obviously, there's no point pitching another unique gin to you. I mean, what would make it appealing to you to just listen to another gin pitch? And
So
I think the second part of the question would be, if the category you're in is really not big and you're trying to find that benchmark that you can test your product against, what would you suggest in areas where it's really hard to find, when it's not another gin, but something else? Like,
I think that's a really good question. So gin for me at the moment, I'm delisting gins quicker than I'm buying. Why? Why am I doing it against what everyone on the planet is saying? Because I want to be the trendsetter in 5 years. Not the I don't care about the trend now. So for me, I'm growing rum as a category. I'm growing mezcal as a category. I'm growing non-botanical spirits as a category, non-alcohol, or low alcohol. I think when you're a buyer, you have to have vision. You have to be, I want to be the person that's known to launch the best products. And that's about looking at it. So, with gin now, I take gins on that are good. I want good liquid. If it's not good liquid, don't even bother me. Like now I turn around and I'm like, no. I say no probably to 95% of the gins I try because they're not different. How do you benchmark when you're in a something that's not got much to benchmark against it? Benchmark against liquid. If your liquid is balanced. Balance is the most important thing in liquid. So, nothing should stand out. The alcohol should be balanced. The texture should be good. Go and look at other spirits that are well known to have good qualities. So, if you're taking, let's take botanical spirits, that's not really a category. Well, at the moment, it's not really a category. We're developing it as a category because I think it is interesting because I'm sorry, gin, the clue is in the title. It should fucking taste of juniper. Excuse my French. But actually, non-botanical spirits is much more interesting because you can go out and you can play with different flavors and profiles and things like that. But there's not much, because maybe one, if you look at what the guys at ex-Noma guys, what they called, my God, brain's gone dead.
Renee.
Are doing, they were benchmarking against things that were similar. So it might be a Genever you benchmark against because your botanical spirit has a little bit more sort of aniseedy notes or something. Look at something that's similar. And actually, if you're doing something that's not really kind of got a lot of scope around it, it's a good thing. Just go and give it to people to taste and say, do you like this? At the end of the day, people will tell you it's good, it's bad, it's indifferent.
Thanks, Dawn.
Hi, I was wondering how important are the different trades for you when you build your brand, like on-trade, off-trade, specialist stores, and bottom line, how important is digital commerce to build your brand?
So I guess for Seedlip, one of the key areas for us was on-trade. And actually trial is a real big objective for us. You've got to try the liquid before, having someone paying 25, 26 pounds a bottle for it. And actually working with, really amazing bartenders to be our advocates of the brand has actually helped launch us into the off-trade. So we over-index in on-trade. So we work tirelessly with, top bartenders. How can we make this interesting to them? Whether that's an amazing cocktail that we've created in-house or we're doing an amazing event in their bar, is critical to the success of Seedlip, really. I guess the other area for us, so to your point about digital commerce, so we have a D2C site, and it's quite interesting. The more distribution that we've had, we sort of notice a slight dip in sales from a D2C perspective, but actually it plays a really important role to actually understand who our consumers are. And without that, we wouldn't be able to do as many kind of interesting consumer insight campaigns. And actually, we and Ben Branson, the founder, is incredibly kind of keen on sort of understanding what those insights are, rather than, for example, testing and doing things that might not necessarily be right for the business. So yeah, that's hopefully answer your question.
So I think that's a wrap, isn't it? It's an hour up. Okay. So thank you all for coming and joining us. Thank you so much to the panel. Can I say a round of applause for these guys?